Alright, I'm doubly excited to make this video because one, it's the start of Dylan's electric music, and so just a huge turning point in his career, but also a groundbreaking song. And for a variety of reasons. One thing that's easy to overlook a bit is this is probably one of the most shocking lead-off singles in rock album history. Remember, his first 4 albums were all acoustic, and he was the king of the singer-songwriter mold. His most recent album that we're looking at here, of Another Side of Bob Dylan, was a stark break in its own right because it moved him away from the topical songs that made him the king of protest music and that got him dubbed the voice of his generation. And so he had 2 crowns, really, and he gives up one. But he is still the folky, just him, his voice, guitar, harmonica rack. And even the title of that last album, Another Side of Bob Dylan, it's like, hey, I want to show this other side of myself as a singer-songwriter who paints in these colors here, who makes acoustic music. So here comes the next album, highly anticipated. What's he going to do this time? Is it more of the personal songwriting? Is he going to go back to topical songs? And as soon as you put the needle on the vinyl, the very first song, the one we're going to talk about today, you get totally twisted around because it turns out he is plugged in. Not just him and his band, and on top of that, they are playing loud and fast. And Dylan the rock star comes out of the closet by kicking the door off of its hinges. Subterranean Homesick Blues is a fast, frenetic, almost overwhelming number. And so quite a choice and a purposeful one. It was the first song on the album for your coming out party. The very next song on the album, She Belongs to Me, it's electric, but it's a soft song. Like, that would have been a more gentle way to ease people into, hey, I play electric now. But let's get into how it was groundbreaking musically and step immediately into the controversy. Is this a rap song? Did Bob Dylan invent rap? You're looking at Arlo Guthrie. How about that for a tie-in? Making that case in character on a early 90s TV show that certainly passed my radar unnoticed, Birds of Paradise. A short-lived Stephen Bochco series, by the way. Remember him? Anyway, Arlo's character is trying to convince a very young Seth Green's character. Oh my, how time flies by. But anyway, trying to convince his character of this proposition. Stephen King asked the question on Twitter one time, and predictably caught hell for it because the question proposes that someone who is not African American invented a rap. But before we get into that, let's start with the simple question: is it a rap song? Can it count as a rap song? I think it can. You can watch a succession of videos that are all pretty entertaining. They have these YouTube reaction videos, and there's a lot of channels about reacting to songs. Well, there's a lot of hip hop fans reacting to this song, having never heard of it before. And they pretty quickly lock in on the fact that it's, let's just say rap-like. In the video that's now scrolling off the screen, that guy talks about the flow. The guy before that was talking about spitting bars. This guy, the thumbnail that's coming up right now, he recites some of the lyrics and talks about how it seems to him the packed-in words and the phrasing are what a modern rapper would do with those same words. I bet you've never heard of the band First Aid Kit. I sure hadn't before researching this video. They're a Swedish sister folk duo, but anyway, at this award ceremony here, I don't know why, because I couldn't understand what anybody was saying, but they rap the beginning of our song. In case we need more white people to make this case, Ed Sheeran, and I know he's far from being a rapper, he made an interesting comparison between Eminem and Bob Dylan. And the man is, a lifelong musician. Speaking of Sheeran, quote, "You might look at them and say they're 2 totally different acts, but all you have to do with Eminem is put a guitar behind his words, and it's a very similar thing. Folk music tells stories, and hip-hop tells stories. There's just a beat that separates it. Bob Dylan raps his tunes. If you listen to Subterranean Homesick Blues, that's not a million miles away from an Eminem tune." Well, we definitely need to pull in a bona fide African-American rapper, preferably an icon, to help us out here. So how about an icon and hip-hop pioneer, the great Chuck D? He was the featured guest on a hip-hop version of our song by the Impossibles. Red Hot Chili Peppers did a version that's basically a rap song, in their style. Side note, I respect this band. I was listening to them long before they became famous. Only because they were in the skateboarding circles that I was in when I was a kid. But I never, ever have to hear their version again. Ugh. Anyway, the point is, a lot of musicians and a lot of music fans instantly see the similarity that I was talking about before. And that's because, quite simply, it's there. There's a there when it comes to this question. This 1965 single by a Jewish folk singer turning rock star sounds remarkably like what would later be rap. But fear not if it sounds like we're about to try to take away the credit and the agency from African Americans for just one of the amazing music styles they invented. Because we know Bob Dylan has absolutely no problem modeling a song of his off of a previous example. In fact, that seems to be how he mostly works. And in this case, we know straight from him, the model was Chuck Berry's Too Much Monkey Business. And in my mind, the claim that so-and-so invented whatever, X, means they were the first domino, right? And in this sequence that we're talking about, sequence of songs and influences, then Subterranean Homesick Blues could obviously not be first. And Dylan said it was Too Much Monkey Business mixed with some scat songs of the 40s in terms of influences. It's much more than that, as we're about to get into, but the important point is, this came first. Now, I will say, and I think this is a very defensible claim, Dylan's song is the first in popular recorded music that, how do I say this, happens to have a sound and feel that strongly reminds us of what would later be hip-hop. Too Much Monkey Business, for all its greatness and innovation, just doesn't happen to sound or feel like later hip-hop. But again, this is a conscious imitation by Dylan of Chuck Berry and others, and other African-American artists. So you can't possibly claim it was first in line. You also, importantly to me, we shouldn't pretend that this song, for all the kind of accidental rhyming, pun intended, that it has with rap, it shouldn't be considered uninfluence. If you removed this song from history, that would be horrible, but if you did, that would have no effect on the later invention and development of rap. And honestly, I think you could say that about Too Much Monkey Business too. You know, sometimes there's precursors that aren't in the actual, causal chain. And I think that's the deal with Dylan's song. You're not going to find an earlier song that sounds and feels more like rap than this one. It even, like some hip-hop, has an urban, on-the-street, anti-authority, drug outlaw vibe. But with all that out of the way, let's get to what other ingredients went into the creation of our song. You might have noticed the similarity in this Jack Kerouac book title, The Subterraneans, to today's song. Well, the beats, it turns out, I think are an important component of what's going on. Really as important as the ones that were actually listed by Dylan. I think he was talking kind of just musically when he made his comments. You can therefore kind of sort of wrap your mind around the genesis of this song if you think of it as the fast-paced proto-rap of Chuck Berry's song that we've mentioned a million times already, keeping in mind that that song was kind of a litany of complaints about what's going on to the narrator of the song, what's going on to young people of the day. And then you add the hip, fast-talking, anti-establishment, counterculture, drug culture world of the beats. I guarantee I will be the first person in history to bring Yakety Yak into this conversation, a conversation about Subterranean Homesick Blues, but it fits, because the thing is, the Chuck Berry song was basically his Yakety Yak. It's a list of grievances, but they're not overly serious. It's in this Yakety Yak, isn't it tough to be a young person nowadays meaning the 1950s? Isn't it annoying that I have to work really hard and still can't pay all my bills? A woman wants to tie me down, get married. Even the verse about having served in the army and in the war, which of course would have been in the previous decade, still has that 50s kind of innocence varnish to it. Actually, you know what an even better 50s analog is? I only thought of this when I was editing the video, so I'm coming back in to insert this. Summertime Blues. I can't believe that didn't occur to me before Yakety Yak. And on the other end of the spectrum, you know what a later song is that has the exact vibe we're talking about here? Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. Rock and roll history side note, that's interesting because this song owes its existence to Chuck Berry as well. Keith Richards went to Mick Jagger with the Chuck Berry line, "If I don't get no satisfaction from the judge," that being from the song 30 Days, and they used it as the starting point of a song. A song, by the way, that came out in 1965, the same year as the song we're talking about today, just a few months after Dylan's single. So we are probably the first people to ever notice that in the first half of 1965, two blue-chip 60s icons, Dylan and the Stones, both had big hits with thematically similar songs that were inspired by two different Chuck Berry songs. And by the way, it wouldn't surprise me if even on an other than conscious level, Too Much Monkey Business had a strong influence on Satisfaction, despite the conscious exercise being taking that line from 30 Days and turning it into a song. And it's interesting that both songs, Satisfaction and Subterranean Homesick Blues, both up the ante. Satisfaction, while also a general critique, had some sexual allusions which made the song controversial. At first it was only the pirate radio stations that were playing it. But Dylan, whose song, as a reminder, came out months before Satisfaction, goes way further than that, not in the sexual vein, but in the controversial, at least if people, the squares, had known what he was singing about. I can't find the citation or remember exactly who it was, but it was one of Dylan's contemporaries or somebody from back in the day who said, in retrospect, they would have arrested Dylan if they had known what he was singing about on this song. And Too Much Monkey Business and Satisfaction are lists of grievances that the young person listening to the song can relate to. Dylan goes much further. He does something totally different, or he adds a layer. And it's about the generation gap and the anti-establishment counterculture and, yes, drug culture. But it's so much more than that, than, hey, this new generation is doing all these different kinds of drugs. It was about even like active anti-establishment, like guerrilla activities. And you are looking at a mugshot of some of the members of the Weather Underground, a group of activists who took their name from a lyric in today's song. We'll get to that. But this was not a peaceful protest group. This wasn't hippy-dippy stuff. No, they orchestrated bombings. That's why they were being searched for here in this picture by the FBI. Now, they formed up a few years after the song as the counterculture of the 60s really kicked into high gear. But that kind of thing was in Dylan's 1965 song. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that claim is arguable, but then again, these people that we're looking at here seemed to think that subject matter was in the song. Dylan, of course, the master of capturing the feeling in the air and putting it into song. And this song puts its finger on the shift from this kind of America here, the post-World War II conformist era, to the present, from I Like Ike to turn on, tune in, drop out. And it delivers all of that in a remarkable package with the, rapid-fire lyrics and pedal-to-the-floor music. John Lennon supposedly reacted to the song by just having kind of a crisis of confidence, like wondering how he could compete with creating material like it. And that's no knock on Lennon, who is, of course, a genius in his own right. It's just a statement to how revolutionary this song actually was. And then remember what we said at the start of the video, and it's Dylan's first electric song. And by the way, John Lennon, years later, 74, he produced and I think played on Harry Nilsson's, pretty much spelled like it sounds, cover of this song. So that's a fun listen on YouTube. Back to the groundbreaking aspect of this song, the publication American Songwriter says, quote, Subterranean Homesick Blues was such a trailblazing work, it almost feels underappreciated. That being said, there's no doubt the song had a large impact. Covers of it, but more especially kind of references to it or incorporations of lyrics from it are numerous. I mean, it goes from, from bands we've already mentioned, like Red Hot Chili Peppers, to Elvis Costello, Echo and the Bunnymen, Jesus and the Mary Chain, R.E.M., Beastie Boys, Jet, Radiohead, In Excess, The Lumineers. And you'll notice most of those band names skew, maybe they're not current, some are, like The Lumineers, but most of them were from subsequent generations, from long after when the song came out. And by the way, speaking of In Excess, that's a good segue for talking about yet another way in which this song was groundbreaking, and that was its proto-music video. In Excess was about as big of a band as there was in the world when they made the video for their song Mediate, and it had a very purposeful nod to the quote-unquote video for our song. And that, of course, came as a clip shown at the very start of Dylan's, well, I almost hate to use this kind of word yet again, but groundbreaking rockumentary, Don't Look Back. In it, they play the entire song, and Dylan rifles through this set of cue cards, kind of sort of matching the lyrics, and it was very influential. Filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker, in one project, therefore, because he was filming Dylan's 1965 World Tour, of course, that's what the documentary is about, had a dual effect, two different pretty sizable effects on the evolution of rock and roll, that being the music video and the rock tour documentary. By the way, I think I've mentioned this tidbit before, but Dylan has been found to have been quoted in the U.S. legal system more than any other songwriter And it's a line from this song that we'll get to when we get to the lyrics, which is number 1 in that category. So yeah, all that influence and impact for a song that is only 2 minutes and 20 seconds long. And that's for a song that doesn't even have a chorus. You know, the chorus is the part you usually count on to help people remember the song. And despite its short runtime and its short clipped lines, it manages to pack in 323 words. And he's of course got longer songs, both in terms of word count and duration, but pound for pound, this might be his wordiest song of all time. It has 71 lines, 71 of those short lines across just 4 stanzas. That's basically the song structure. Like we said, it has no chorus, so it's just these 4 blasts that come at you in quick succession, very little breathing space in between each of them. We're looking at a picture of Jack Kerouac, by the way, and it makes for an appropriate image, not only because of his influence on this song and that of the beats in general, but because the song starts off with Dylan's narrator standing out on the street. Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine, I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. Just in those first 2 pairs of lines, you get a distillation of the first half of the song. Mixing up the medicine, that's an overt, at least it was to the young people, drug reference. And Dylan on the pavement thinking about the government. So you've got counterculture, drug use, drug experimentation, protest, or certainly at least concerns about authority. A clear inspiration, it seems, for this opening couplet comes from lines written by Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, recorded by the Weavers in the song Takin' It Easy. Pop is in the cellar mixing up the hops, and brother's at the window, he's watching for the cops. Moving on. The man in the trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. There's a lot of mystery here. This man who has shown up has a trench coat and a badge, so that obviously implies a detective. But has he been laid off from his job and he wants to buy some drugs, or has he not been laid off? You know, does that imply something totally different in like 60s street vernacular? And he's got a bad cough, and Johnny is mixing up medicine, but it's obviously not real medicine, it's just drugs to get high with. The in-joke here seems to be that the drug making going on is codeine distillation, and codeine, of course, is used for coughs. So I think it's like, oh man, look at this cough I've got. I need some of that stuff you guys are making. But this is an authority figure, so we're starting off with a note of hypocrisy. But is this all a ruse to get Dylan and his buddy in trouble? Dylan's character seems to be the street man, right? The one who takes these walk-up orders. But anyway, it just doesn't make sense that a cop would try to bust him by showing them his badge and then trying to buy the drugs. But his arrival does represent some kind of danger, as you'll see in just a second in the following lyrics. Some people wonder if the laid off phrase means that guy was laid off from the police force. Don't know. Something about the 60s jargon and fast talking confuses everyone, including people who, unlike me, were old enough to have used that jargon at the time. And that leads to an important milestone in the song, and it's a milestone in every stanza, a turning point, where Dylan addresses the listener with the words, "Look out, kid." Now, what follows is different every time. This time it's, "Look out, kid, it's something you did, God knows when, but you're doing it again." And this is a song by young people for young people, and it's very much about the generation gap, the famous generation gap. And there's an interesting hypocrisy in this stanza and all of them. You know, in this case, look out, kid, it's something you did. Well, like, we know what he's doing. He's selling drugs. At the very least, he's a party to the manufacture of illegal drugs. And so you can't complain that you're a blameless victim of society, of the man, of the older generation, if you get busted for that. But the point is, you're always going to be in trouble for something regardless. But regardless, the warning is the hinge that every stanza turns on. And here's something I find fascinating. I think, can't prove this, I think Dylan is purposely directing the words or the phrase, "look out, kid," to both the person listening to the song and to the characters in the song itself. So every teenager listening in 1965, their ears would perk up, "Look out, kid, it's something you did, God knows when, but you're doing it again." Wow, Bob's talking to me, and yes, that's exactly what my life is like, Bob. Like, that would resonate with them. But he's also warning the character in the song, because the character in the song, here in this stanza, now needs to get moving. The following lines: "You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend." Remember, his current friend is in the basement making drugs. I think he needs to get away from there before the bust happens. "You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend. The man in the coonskin cap and a pig pen wants $11 bills. You only got 10. Why, the song, the blizzard of lyrics it just throws at you is so fun. So who is the coonskin capped man? Well, that would, especially back then. Remember, Dylan and his contemporaries were raised on, westerns and tales of earlier American history. I think it would make anybody think of Davy Crockett. Here's John Wayne playing Davy Crockett. But the character in the song, that could be accidental, just a fun visual that Dylan liked, like why is he by a pig pen? But regardless, the character in the song seems to be a drug dealer, because remember, Dylan had to run. Dylan's character had to run, get away from the place where Johnny was mixing up the medicine, and he's looking for a new friend, that's this guy in the coonskin cap, who wants $11 bills, you've only got 10. So doesn't have enough money to score the drugs he wants. Some people have postulated that the $10 is a reference to a dime bag, found references that say the term dime bag has been around since the 60s, and the song is from 1965, so maybe some of you all know if it was definitely in use at the time that Dylan wrote this song. Either way, I think it's clear this is about a attempted drug transaction. And back to the coonskin cap thing, I just, like others, I really don't know what to make of it. Is he doing some clever play here where a cherished figure from American history is in the modern day selling dime bags? America was founded by rebels, and Davy Crockett was not one of them, but he was a rebellious kind of guy. Is that one little reference marks some kind of note about the conformist culture that became standard in America and was being forced on Dylan and his contemporaries? Is there irony there, given that the nation was founded by and expanded by people who cherished individual, like rugged individualism? And if this is a nation that cherishes individualism, shouldn't me and my friends here, young people in the mid-60s, just be allowed to do our damn drugs? Maybe. Or maybe he just liked the phrase coonskin cap. By the way, the entire line of speculation regarding the coonskin cap, that's my original contribution to the guessing about the lyrics in this song. And regardless, that is the first stanza, and you barely get to catch your breath before you're just assaulted with another, tidal wave of fast-paced lyrics. And this next image is the emblem of the Weather Underground that we already talked about, and you will see why as we get into the second stanza. The first part of which goes, Maggie comes fleet-foot, face full of black soot, talking that the heat put plants in the bed, but phone's tapped anyway. Maggie says that many say they must bust in early May, orders from the DA. Can you imagine, maybe some of you can imagine because you were there, what it was like to be a Dylan fan and listen to this song for the first time? Coming on the heels of the album Another Side of Bob Dylan. An album that musically, but not thematically, matched everything else he had done previously. 4 full albums of all acoustic music. But let's get back to those lyrics. Maggie comes running in, fleet-foot, and yes, Maggie is later on the album going to make us think about the Maggie from Maggie's Farm. But anyway, this Maggie comes running in. Her face is full of black soot. Well, what the heck is that about? Well, you and your friends put black soot or paint on each other's faces if you're going to head out and try some skullduggery at night. And now that could be in a military context, like in this picture here, but Maggie's not in the military, so what is she out there doing? Well, apparently she's spying on the police, because she's racing back to tell her friends that the heat, that of course means the cops, put plants in the bed. And nobody is 100% sure what that means, but a plant could be a spy, something like that usually. If you had an agent who was sleeping with someone to get information, that could be putting a plant in the bed, but we really don't know. We don't have to worry about it too much because the line ends but and leads into the next. But phone's tapped anyway. And Maggie is coming in with this hot intel about the police, about the authorities. Maggie says that many say they must bust in early May, orders from the DA, district attorney. And so the man is listening in, presumably trying to get enough evidence to bust this group. And what is this group up to? Well, we're not sure. Drugs are probably a part of it. And whether or not Dylan meant Weather Underground type anti-government activities, which really heated up in a few years. Late 60s was more the height of it, mid-60s is when the U.S. got involved in the Vietnam War, and that's what really started stirring a lot of this up. But don't forget the Black Panthers. They formalized in 1966. So basically, Dylan is, as he's done so many times, plucking this thing out of the air. The energies that were swirling around the air and coalescing into the various streams we've talked about. So Dylan has upped the ante, right? Whatever's going on is big enough that the authorities are trying to infiltrate this operation. And he ups the ante with the next line, because it's the next "Look out, kid. Look out, kid, don't matter what you did." And this ratchets up the exact message from the last, which was the first, "Look out, kid." That basically it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to get in trouble anyway. The song continues, so from the look out, kid, don't matter what you did, walk on your tiptoes, don't tie no bows, better stay away from those that carry around a fire hose, keep a clean nose, watch the plane close, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. You might have noticed on the line about walking on your tiptoes, I said, walk on your tiptoes, don't tie no bows, like tying a bow, but the lyrics that you saw from Dylan's website says don't try no-dos. No-dos being basically an over-the-counter upper that can definitely be abused, and yes, it's been around since the time of this song. Meanwhile, in the music video, proto-music video that we talked about, the card that he holds at this point says no and then DOS. But a lot of those cards, definitely some of them, were kind of cheekily misspelled. And I think it's pretty clear what happened is the original line was supposed to be don't try no-dos. Definitely fits with the drug theme from earlier, without a doubt, right? Fitting in with the overall song. And for whatever reason, in the take that made it on the album, Dylan, who does like to play with words and switch things up, went with don't tie no bows. By the way, speaking of no-dos being a drug reference, there was a character in Breaking Bad called No-Dos. But I just thought that was funny. One thing we haven't done yet that we usually spend so much time on in these videos is picking apart Dylan's wordplay and rhyming, right? Well, let's use the second half of the stanza here as just an example. Notice the O sound, how many times he crams it in. A lot of internal rhyming, the sound inside of other words, not just at the end of words. It's definitely the sound that powers this set of lines, right? And that's a technique we've talked about a lot. It's not as simplistic as the sound just appearing at the ends of the lines. So it really drives you through. Notice, walk on your tiptoes, don't tie no bows. That has the sound 3 times, not just twice. You know, there's an internal rhyme with tiptoes and bows, but it's no bows or no does. Either way, same thing. You can kind of see how Dylan might have switched then while recording. Either way, that's 3 in just the first line. So that sound appears 9 different times in just the section that we're looking at. So better stay away from those that carry around a fire hose, right? Keep a clean nose, watch the plane close. You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Let's start at the end this time, meaning of that set of lines, because you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows is one of Dylan's most famous lines. So it's highly influential, just really resonated, gets quoted all the time, including in court. We alluded to this earlier. Dylan gets quoted in court more than any other songwriter, and this line is his most often cited line in legal proceedings. I mean, it goes far beyond the Weather Underground, yes, them again, taking their name from this line. And I think this might be previously unremarked upon, but I could be wrong. I just know that I don't have a note about this in my, annotated lyrics that I use for these videos. You know, first I go and read anything I possibly can about the song, any review, any commentary. I think I didn't see this anywhere. Anyway, to know which way the wind blows. You know, how could you not hear that lyric in 1965? And, how could you not immediately think of Blowin' in the Wind? That, of course, not just being the title to one of his famous songs, but the song that put him on the map. I am confident that I'm the first one to put forth what I'm about to say, which is, not just that there's that kind of coincidence, but it's really an interesting milestone in a way, kind of this measuring stick. The first time he used an allusion to the wind, he was a very different person, right? This is not just the first electric song, but the first Dylan, rock star type song. This song is the first time his fans are hearing on a record, on the radio, the, ultra hip, beatnik inspired, fast talking, and yes, drug taking Dylan. And this kind of street smart counterculture Dylan is using that metaphor about the wind in a very different way than he did when he was the earnest folky. Before it was about the great challenges of the day, now it's about, not getting busted and being hip to what's going down so that you don't get taken down. This is Dylan as Jack Kerouac and not Dylan as Woody Guthrie. Now to go back to the top of this section, these lines started with advice right after the look out, marker. If the line is walk on your tiptoes, don't tie no bows, walk on your tiptoes, remember, do your best to not get in trouble. You're still going to. Better stay away from those that carry around a fire hose. That's a reference to the police who were using fire hoses on African-American protesters at the time, or getting the fire department to do it, like in this picture. But no, that's not some solemn note of solidarity with civil rights protesters. It's just a hip snide reference to the authorities. Keep a clean nose, another drug-related reference, obviously. Watch the plainclothes, as in a plainclothed policeman. And that reminds us of the trench-coated detective from earlier. So basically, multiple references to trying to stay away from the cops, not getting busted by them in these lines, with a callback to the first stanza and how the cops were looking for them there. Running surveillance on them, all the stuff we talked about. Now we're looking at a picture of Alanis Morissette because in this picture, she's performing our song. Our song, interesting. What does that say about our relationship to art that we love? Anyway, she performed it at the Bob's induction. He, of course, was not there, at the UK Music Hall of Fame. That was in 2005, and it is a great, really fun version. Highly recommended. Probably my favorite cover of the song. But, you know, she messes up the lyrics twice, and that's counting as conservatively as possible. But that's not a criticism. She's a very accomplished singer. It's just that the song is that challenging. And in fact, Dylan was extremely complimentary about it. He said, "She got that so right, something I'd never been able to do." Which is just further confirmation in a way that, yeah, this has got to be a really difficult song to nail live. I mean, you're going to mess up some lyric or other. And you can imagine why with lyrics like, here we go, picking back up on the song. We're halfway through, and I'm going to compress things now because we're going so long. Get sick, get well, hang around an inkwell, ring bell, hard to tell if anything is gonna sell, try hard, get barred, get back, right braille, get jailed, jump bail, join the army if you fail. Whew, and I'm sure I messed some of that up. But regardless, now that we get into the second half of the song, the lyrics go through a noticeable change, but it's kind of transformed. This series of warnings, the frequency of the warnings / directives, you know, better stay away from those that carry around the fire hose, watch the plainclothes, that kind of a thing. The website Untold Dylan did this count, which is pretty nifty. In the first stanza, there's only 2. In the second, 6. In the third, 14, so a big jump. And in the last, 17. I can't say I had noticed that, but one thing they don't mention is the nature of the advice changes. Whereas the first ones, and remember, in contrast to the much more innocent teenage complaints and warnings from the 1950s songs, the first ones were about, you know, watching out for the authorities, you know, to avoid going to jail. The rest of them, the ones in the second half, for the most part, not exclusively, are more about the expectations put on the young and the advice about kind of staying on the straight and narrow. So you can grow up to be a nice, safe, conventional, conformist American, which is ironic because it's already well understood from earlier in the song that Dylan and his contemporaries, the people listening to the song, are not interested in that. But the directives and really all around the lyrics in this third stanza are by far the most obtuse of the song. Get sick, get well, hang around to inkwell. People are just, you know, throwing guesses out in the wind, myself included. The strongest one there seems to be the Inkwell was a somewhat famous coffee shop near Monmouth College favored by the Beats. And that is possible because of the Beats' influence on the song, but it's definitely unconfirmed. And anyway, again, in this string of advice, get sick, get well, hang around to inkwell, ring a bell, hard to tell if anything is gonna sell. Pretty opaque. The lines about ringing a bell and is something in a sell, is that like a traveling salesman talk? Like the kind of crappy, conventional job Dylan doesn't want as an adult? That's my best guess. Followed by try hard, get barred. Well, you could try too hard and get yourself barred from a whole variety of fields. More than one person online guesses that that is a McCarthyism reference. That's possible. And what comes next is either get back right braille or get back ride rail. And the official lyrics say right braille, but yes, the official lyrics, as we've talked about many times, are sometimes flat out wrong, and yes, the cue cards in this music video, which say right braille, sometimes don't match the lyrics that Dylan laid down on the actual track. And by the way, even his handwritten lyrics, or at least one version of them for this song, say right braille. Good luck listening to the actual audio over and over again like I did, trying to make it out. I think he says right rail, which would be, of course, a hobo reference, and, you know, the song is rife with possibilities for ad-libbing during the recording. Either way, moving on, get jailed, jump bail, join the army if you fail. So he definitely did something he shouldn't have, and that's why he got arrested. Jump bail, right? So now you're on the run. Join the army if you fail. There's a story there going on. We don't really have to tease it out. The song doesn't give you enough information to. But what's important is this is, again, about the limited options that someone in the life Dylan is portraying has. And now we get to the next lookout. Look out, kid, you're gonna get hit by users, cheaters, six-time losers, hanging around the theaters. Girl by the whirlpools, looking for a new fool. Don't follow leaders, watch the parking meters. So you can see there's a return to the beat and street side of things. So we've got talk of users, obviously another drug reference. Six-time losers, that could refer to a prison sentence or sentences. Hang around the theaters, good luck. We're just guessing. Maybe it's just a good rhyme. Girl by the whirlpool, looking for a new fool. That's interesting, but admittedly only from a Dylan obsessive standpoint. But, you know, I'm not going to leave it unremarked. This is a dynamic that we see for the first time in Dylan's catalog here, and we see again on this very same album in the awesome and hilarious song Bob Dylan's 115th Dream. And what we're talking about is a woman, presumably an attractive woman, luring a man in so that he can be taken advantage of, either by herself or, in this later song, with a Confederate. Which, by the way, is something he might have gotten from a passage in a different Jack Kerouac book than the one we already mentioned, The Subterraneans, his seminal work, On the Road. I just happened to trip across that the other day. And the two lines that end the stanza are very well remembered. Don't follow leaders, watch the parking meters. Don't follow leaders, that in and of itself is a very direct echo of the anti-establishment feeling in the air. I love the last line. It's obviously a little bit more mysterious. Watch the parking meters. You know, parking meters are put there by authority figures. They're a rule enforcement mechanism. And so they match the thread in the song about this advice and, you know, keep your nose clean and follow the rules, essentially. And in a way, parking meters are kind of a state surveillance thing. Also, like, how long have you been here? You know, keeping tabs on you. And that matches with what was going on earlier in the song as well, with the wiretaps. And there's more, because the enjoinder here is watch the parking meters. And whether it was back in the day or today via an app, either way, you have to watch the parking meter in the sense that you have to watch out that you don't run out of time. And Dylan's character, and therefore the young at the time this song came out, they're running out of time right before this conventional life catches up with them or tries, because the very next and final stanza begins. The next 8 lines are, I think, the best part of the song. They bring everything together and prepare you for the finale. And the next 8 lines are the last 1/8 of the song, because there's 4 stanzas, and remember, they're each really bisected, the before and after lookout. So this is the part leading up to the final lookout. And in those short 8 lines, each one of them is a short line, Dylan takes us from birth to the end of life, as far as life having any meaning. I'm going to read the lyrics, but maybe comment on them more than usual as I'm reading them. So if you want to see the strict lyrics, you can go to this image here, or just look it up yourself. Get born, keep warm. So birth, and yes, this is a baby Bob Dylan here. Short pants, romance, learn to dance. Short pants, childhood, right, before later on you have to wear slacks, etc. Romance, young love. Learn to dance, learning etiquette, which is kind of a big deal in this song. That pressure. Get dressed, so you can't dress like a kid anymore. This is in juxtaposition to the shorts line from just a second ago. Get blessed. That could come in a variety of forms, like a coming-of-age religious ceremony, or a wedding, or even something secular like the high school graduation, which was a huge deal back in Dylan's day. I know it still is, but really much more so than today, because back then, for almost everybody, it marked the end of adolescence and the beginning of adulthood, right? Most of these people had to go out and get jobs. And back to the line, or lines, get dressed, get blessed, try to be a success. You get dressed up for this ceremony. In a way, you get blessed, and the whole thing is really hoping that, you know, you're going to go out into the world now and be a success. Right? The ultimate pressure, right? Please her, please him, buy gifts. And back to etiquette and advice about how to be proper. You can't show up to someone's house empty-handed. You have to bring a present. As just one example where you have to buy gifts. You just have to. These are the rules. You know, please her, please him. Be a nice boy or girl. Don't steal, don't lift. Don't become a juvenile delinquent. Right? Because if you do, your life is going to go on the wrong path. But what is the right path? Well, according to Dylan, it's, and this is maybe the very best part of the song, 20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift. That's what you get. That's your reward for all that rule following. So let's put it all together here. Get born, keep warm, short pants, romance, learn to dance, get dressed, get blessed, try to be a success, please her, please him, buy gifts, don't steal, don't lift, 20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift. And what a biting, sardonic, super concentrated critique of, the reality of the American life versus the American dream that's being sold and told to Dylan and his cohorts. The bit about the day shift, that's kind of the mic drop moment of the song. And I think a lot of songwriters would linger on something like that, but nothing stops Dylan in the breakneck pace of the song. And if you stop and think about it, that's an interesting choice that he's willing to do that. A lot of songs, when they know they, have done something, they'll sit on it, linger on it, let it breathe. But a lot of times, even in really good songs, to me it feels like just you can see the effort. It's a little too showy. Hey, did you see what I did there? And it kind of takes you out of the song. And I might have just ruined a lot of good songs for you, because once you notice it, it's really annoying. I'll even give a quick example, and I don't usually do that because I don't want to make it a competition between Dylan and other songwriters, but here's a great band, Boy Genius. Absolutely fantastic. My kids got sick of hearing that in the car. But as an example, in their song Not Strong Enough, they come up with a really good line. Always an angel, never a god. And they really want you to know how good it is, because the entire bridge of the song is that line sung 12 times in a row. And I think otherwise the song is really just tremendous, but I've always been distracted by that. And, that's just an artistic choice they can make, or any writer can make. I'm going to hammer this thing home or do this to highlight this bit that I'm really proud of. But I love how in this song, Dylan comes up with just a banger of a line. And again, if you blink, you'll miss it, and he's not going back to it at all. In conventional songwriting, you'd come up with something great like that, and you'd make it the hook. You'd build the song around it. It would show up over and over again in the chorus. This song, meanwhile, just has no hook, which I think is great. Anyway, I said Dylan just moves on, so I need to. Final bit, the last lookout. Look out, kid, they keep it all hid. Better jump down a manhole, light yourself a candle. Don't wear sandals, can't avoid the scandals. Don't want to be a bum, you better chew gum. The pump don't work because the vandals took the handles. Notice the turn with look out, kid, they keep it all hid. Very different from the other instances of this turning point. The magazine American Songwriter says, quote, one of the lines, look out, kid, they keep it all hid, is lifted wholesale as homage or reference to Woody Guthrie's Ludlow Massacre, end quote. I have no idea what they're talking about there. I'm familiar with that Woody Guthrie song. None of those words, that phrase, it's not in there. I'm confused. I must be missing something really obvious, I guess. If you know what it is, drop it in the comments. But back to the line itself, actually a couplet. Look out, kid, they keep it all hid. So now the lens is on society and manipulation, and this reinforces the message that even if you play by the rules, you're not going to win. Also, this is, to me, that classic Dylan trick that I've talked about in a lot of videos. Because there's no traditional song structure in this song, and there's not the very predictable bridge to announce, hey, we're about to wrap this thing up, this hint in the lyrics themselves that the song is about to wrap up. Every other lookout is look out, you this, you that, etc., to the kid that he's speaking to. So right off the bat, look out, kid, they, something is different. That being, in this case, that we are at the end of the song. Better jump down a manhole. Okay, well, if you go down a manhole, you're underground, and what's the title of the song? Subterranean Homesick Blues. Matches the theme in that way. Always little things, little connections to notice and make with Dylan's songwriting. But it goes deeper than that, as it often does with Dylan's writing. There's that A level, but then the B level. So even if you notice, and I bet many people never noticed it, here as things wrap up, the song literally goes underground. And being underground, metaphorically, is the basis of the song title. And all of that, though, is, like I said, just on the surface. Deeper down, no pun intended, you have the fact that going underground physically, as the character does in the song, is reinforcing the message about being part of the societal underground. To be more precise, Dylan takes us to the underground. He tells you to go there. Dylan, like the Beats before him, who are of course a big influence on this song, is not interested in the conventional, straight, surface life. And remember that the Beats basically gave this song its title, including the subterranean aspect within that title, so it circles back that way as well. And speaking of circling back, remember that the song started underground. That very first line, Johnny's in the basement. So you start there and you end up there. Anyway, the final, basically eighth of the song, after this last turning point, this last lookout, I think we can handle pretty quickly. It's a reprise of everything we've heard, all the themes. Don't wear sandals, try to avoid the scandals, or can't avoid the scandals. I always thought that line was try, but I think he actually sings it can't. Official lyrics say try, but we know they're not always right. Regardless, I haven't seen anybody postulate this. Don't wear sandals. You can't avoid the scandals, don't want to be a bum, you better chew gum. All of that, again, reinforces everything we've heard. Hey, you need to straighten up and fly right, or you're going to end up like this, blah, 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 yakety yak, adult advice. But anyway, what I wanted to throw out there as a hypothesis is this a cheeky reference to Jesus? Wearing sandals, being involved in scandals. Jesus was a scandalous figure at the time and actually for centuries with mainstream society. Being a bum, wasn't Jesus kind of a bum? Did he have a day job? No, he didn't, right? Does he have more in common with the kind of itinerant beat poets of the 50s than he does with the straight-laced factory job dad who's telling Dylan to just live a completely conventional life, live by the exact rules that society lays down? Maybe. And now the final couplet, the pump don't work because the vandals took the handles. And from Jesus Christ, maybe, to Robert Browning, almost certainly, via well-known Dylan critic and writer Michael Gray. He cites Robert Browning's Up at a Villa, Down in the City, and in that poem it says, at some point, one, he carries a flag straight up, and another across with handles, and the Duke's Guard brings up the rear, for the better prevention of scandals. Certainly not a one-for-one, but certainly an inspiration. And of course, there's other poems people cite in trying to find different bits of inspiration for our song. The site Untold Dylan cites the beat poem Pull My Daisy. As I understand it, that was a poem and a short film, the short film from 1959, so maybe even that was an influence because our song had a short film made about it, which, as we talked about, like 40 minutes ago, is considered the first rock and roll video. And another one definitely worth mentioning, whoever first made this observation, and we don't know who it was, is, I think, really onto something. Lewis Carroll, whose most famous work is visually alluded to in this image here, of course, wrote a nice, short, very pithy, funny poem called Rules and Regulations. And it's a lot about behaving, for instance, learn well your grammar and never stammer, write well and neatly, and swing most sweetly, be enterprising, loverly arising. And so advice to young people, etiquette-based advice, of the type that we see towards the end of the Dylan song. But then it's kind of sarcastic and antisocial as well, because it ends, sit close to the table, take care of a candle, shut a door by the handle, so possibly that influences the end of our song, giving the Browning song competition, actually, for using the word handle and that sound. Don't push with your shoulder until you are older, don't lose a button, refuse cold mutton, starve your canaries, believe in fairies. If you're able, don't have a stable. With any mangers, be rude to strangers. He wrote this when he was a kid, but pretty interesting there. There's a fun and risky or risque slight to Jesus, it sounds like, right? Don't have a stable with any mangers, right? You couldn't take Joseph and Mary in on that night if you didn't have a manger. Don't have a stable with any mangers, be rude to strangers, refuse those strangers. Mary and Joseph. And anyway, Jesus might be alluded to at the end of this poem, as he might be alluded to at the end of our song. But speaking of might, this poem here only might be an influence on Dylan's song. We are actually wrapping up, so let's talk about rhyme scheme a little. Well, there isn't a strict one, as you might imagine. Very first verse starts off ABA. Basement, medicine, pavement. The next two, the middle verses, establish a sound and then use it 4 times in a row. But then the final verse goes ABCC. So warm, dance, blessed success. All that just to say there's not a strict rhyme scheme in the way that Dylan sometimes does with the more of a traditional poem type structure, right? Now, what the song does do is rely a lot on the repetition of sound. You kind of go island hopping from one mini section where one sound really dominates to then another where a different sound takes you through, and then you jump to the next one. And in case you're curious, what it really does on a finer level is the first half of each verse, because remember there's just 4 verses and they can each be split into 2, right? With the Lookout Kid being the turning point. The first half, the first section of each verse always is dominated by just 2 sounds, one then the other. So for instance, at the beginning, it's basement, pavement, government, and then off, cough, off. The beginning of the second verse, it's foot, soot, put, and even but, like he changes, B-U-T, he changes the way he pronounces it to kind of make it match, and then anyway, say, may, D-A, and so on. Well, here now let's do just one example of what happens in the second part of every verse. Again, of course, you get the Lookout Kid, and the lines that lead up to it always kind of crescendo, badge out laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. So you kind of plateau for a second with Lookout Kid, it's something you did, and then he launches into the new section, the second half of each verse. Unsurprisingly, that second part also doesn't always use the same rhyme scheme, but it always does the same thing. It takes off, like we talked about. Lookout Kid, it's something you did, so pivot. God knows when, but you're doing it again, you better duck down the alleyway. Just kind of always takes off that way. And then there's always a mini pause. So for instance, from this part of another verse, Lookout Kid, you're going to get hit by users, cheaters, 6-time losers, hang around the theaters. And right there's that mini little pause. Girl by the whirlpool's looking for a new fool. And then, because everything in the song is fast, he has to really accelerate again, and he does, to get in the predominant rhyme of the end of each verse. So, for instance, Lookout Kid, don't matter what you did. Walk on your tiptoes, don't tie no bows, better stay away from those that carry around the fire hose. Mini pause. Keep a clean nose, watch the plane close, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. That 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the rhythm that ends every verse, and it really is powerful, and then gives them a chance to actually pause as much as possible before starting the next verse. And what's neat is that always works even if the rhyme scheme is different, and that is actually kind of emblematic of his approach to the whole song. So for instance, the end of one of the verses, whirlpool, fool, leaders, meters. So A, B, B, right? And it still has that same rhythm as the end of the song, when in the end of that verse, it says, bum, gum, work, handles. That is not the same rhyme scheme. In fact, you have to go to 5 lines instead of 4 to make it work, because it's scandals, bum, gum, work, handles. And then there's different versions elsewhere in the song too. So again, he can really mix it up that way. They don't have to rhyme along the same pattern, but rhythmically it's the same pattern, to me. What else? Obviously, there's internal rhyming, like in the last line that I just read, vandals, handles in one line. Pants, romance, dance, all 3 of those in one line. Another thing you'll see in this song is kind of forcing a word to fit a rhyme, even though it's not a perfect one, but in how he pronounces the word, because the song is based so much on repetition of a sound, just ringing, like wringing all the water out of a rag. Like we broke down earlier in the video, but here's a different example, a different part of the song. Phone's tapped anyway. Maggie says that many say they must bust in early May. Orders from the DA. By the way, this picture here is of filmmaker Spike Lee's father, and that's because he played bass on this track. But yeah, back to getting that much mileage out of a certain sound and shoehorning some words to fit the bill, even though they don't necessarily. Foot, soot, put, but. I think I talked about that already, right? But the way he says but, it kind of makes it fit and lets him get away with continuing the sound that he wants to continue. I'm going to find another one here. Yeah, towards the end of the song. The part that goes manhole, candle, sandals, scandals, vandals, handles. Well, manhole does not rhyme with candle in the strictest sense, right? Because it's vowel L-E versus consonant L-E. Look at that manhole. Look at that candle. But they're close enough. Dylan makes it work. And then what's more important is he tacks it on to the sandals, scandals, vandals, handles, and pulls it all off as if he's repeating the same sound over and over again. Listening to the song, no one's going to notice. Jump down a manhole, light yourself a candle, don't wear sandals, try to avoid the scandals, etc. And that might actually be the last thing I want to say about a truly great song that kicks off the most epic stretch of Bob Dylan's career, Subterranean Homesick Blues. Bye.